Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is set to announce his bid for president tonight. In a conversation on Twitter with Elon Musk, we will size up his chances. We'll then turn to the debt ceiling negotiations. With the deadline fast approaching, the House GOP is pressing for deep spending cuts. Will Biden cave? And what if he doesn't? Then we'll once again revisit the Bud Light boycott with some depressing news. It worked. With sales on the decline and the company cracking down on progressive voices within, the right won. And now they're turning their ire on other companies like Target, and we'll discuss what we can do about it. Marjorie Taylor Greene paid $100,000 for McCarthy's used chapstick. Yes, you heard that right. We'll do our best to explain what's going on. This is Majority 54.
Jason, well, it happens tonight. DeSantis is officially going to jump in, and definitely an unconventional rollout here. 6 p.m. Eastern time, he'll be hitting Twitter Spaces, which... You're the Twitter expert here. What's Twitter Spaces?
Twitter Spaces it's just audio, right? Like there was this thing people may remember during the pandemic that popped up and was like huge for like 5 minutes, which was called Clubhouse, which was this social media site where you went on and it was just audio. It was like sort of like a live interactive podcast, right? And they would have people who were hosts. Twitter Spaces, I don't think I've ever done one, is basically the same thing. It's just Twitter we'll just go ahead and do that since people seem to like it. And then Clubhouse kind of went away, I think, or maybe it got acquired. I don't know. But that's what it is. It's like, I don't know, man. It's like a conference call. Twitter Spaces is basically a conference call. You can tune in. If you like raise your hand, they probably can recognize you, which they're not going to do. And it's a conversation, I guess, audio only between Musk and DeSantis with some like mega donor moderating it, I believe.
Yeah, David Sachs. I think he's the guy from the All In podcast, which is a very popular sort of tech bro podcast. Interesting podcast for another day. We talk about that. But this is not how I pictured DeSantis announcing. First of all, I pictured him like in a school with like a bunch of like grumpy kids behind him who are forced to be like, his like sort of, stage setting. And he'll talk about how he took on the sort of beast that is sort of progressive pandemic policy and CRT and all this other stuff and how he won, right? That's what I expected from him. This is a curious choice, super curious choice. And they know better than I do about what they're looking to do, but it would make more sense in a world where raising money was his number one concern right now, but he's been really effective at raising money. And I think a lot of people have been looking at him. He's kind of dropped a little bit in the polls over the past few months. And there's this narrative forming within sort of the conventional wisdom that, hey, DeSantis is dead. And right now, the Real Clear Politics polling average has Trump at, and this is a national polling. It has Trump at 56.3, DeSantis at 19.4, Pence 5.6, Haley 4.3, Vivek Ramaswamy 3.6. Vivek, by the way, we've been covering him for a while. He's coming on a little bit, I'm starting to see a lot about him.
He's polling in Kander presidential campaign territory.
You go.
Or I remember there was a poll had me at like 4% or something like that.
Well, Iowa. You would have done if you would have announced, you would be doing way better than
sure. But I remember sitting with Obama and saying, he was like, "Look, man," and he was very encouraging. But he was like, "At this moment, nobody knows who you are," and I was like, well, this poll, and I didn't even get halfway through it. And he's like, nobody knows who you are. And I was like, you're right. Nobody knows who I am.
Well, it's interesting you should mention Obama because I was on that campaign starting in February 2007, and we were getting killed for a while. And as of May of 2007, so the equivalent period of time that we're in right now, Hillary was up 62-23 in the national polls. And she was up in all the early states. It wasn't until the summer that we were starting to pull closer to her in the early states. And it wasn't until the fall that we started to seriously narrow the national gap. And so what the name of the game here is to survive and advance, right? And for DeSantis, he's trying to capacity build right now. And I think it's way too early to say that he is, like he's going to lose or that it was, he's
dude hasn't even announced.
Right. And, in that same year, this is what the GOP field looked like in the national polls, the Gallup poll in May of 2007. Giuliani with 25 points, Fred Thompson 19, Romney 17, McCain 14. McCain, obviously, who went on to get the nomination, was fourth in the polls. So this is way too early to tell. No matter what you think about DeSantis, it is way too early to say that he isn't going to win. It's way too early to say that Tim Scott can't win or Haley or any of these other people. I personally think Scott is underrated in this race. I actually think his announcement, we're never going to like a GOP candidate. So that's stipulated.
Right.
But I think
if
his
announcement. If we do, they're going to lose. Like, if
right.
we do.
Yeah. Which is probably why.
It's like, John Kasich seems tolerable. And then they're like, who's John Kasich? Like,
right. Like,
that's how you know.
Like
they're never going to make it.
Yeah. Your buddy, the governor of Utah, if up to me, he would be the GOP nominee.
Right.
But
which is why he won't be,
right?
Because they'll just play clips of people like you and me being like, "Fella's all right."
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
It's funny. I might interview him over the summer. There's some conference going on where somebody suggested I interview him, and I was like, "Sure, love the guy."
Spencer Cox, shout out.
Yeah, would love to talk to him. But okay, so the point here being, we have no idea, and by the time this airs on our podcast forum, this forum will already happen. Although we're going live midday today on Wednesday. And I think it's really fascinating because the early state polls are actually much more narrow. So in New Hampshire, the last reputable poll I saw is the UNH poll in April, 42-22 Trump DeSantis, more narrow than the national polls. Iowa, May 11th, American Greatness poll, 42-34. So this guy is well in it. And he did a really smart thing early on in this race, which is he did a book tour. I'm putting air quotes around it. So he didn't have to dip into any campaign funds. And he's been traveling the country to both early states and other places, essentially doing the work of a campaign without having to spend any campaign dollars. And so now that
being able to accept all sorts of in-kind stuff like rides on private jets and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So those days are over now. He's now squarely in the middle of the campaign. Obviously, Trump is going to feel a little bit threatened by all this. A spokesperson, Caroline Leavitt, spokesperson for Make America Great Again, said the following, quote, "This is one of the most out-of-touch campaign launches in modern history. The only thing less relatable than a niche campaign launch on Twitter is DeSantis' after party at the Uber Elite Four Seasons Resort in Miami." I don't know.
Let's just stop for a moment and just appreciate the fact that there's no such thing as irony or hypocrisy in that world. Like, the dude owns hotels.
Yes.
And they're like, "Whoa, you're having your after." Trump made his announcement by coming down the escalator in his own building, right? So that's all beside the point.
It's all scorpion versus tarantula stuff,
Exactly.
It's like, yeah,
exactly. All right. So, but let's do this exercise because it is a curious announcement. Let's try, before we just, kind of make fun of it, which is what a lot of the left is going to do. Let's make the argument for why they would do it this way.
Yes.
Right. Let's see if we can figure it out. I'll start. I can think of a couple of things. One, he wants to position himself as the next generation candidate, right? The youthful candidate.
For sure.
So going and doing something very different and doing it in a different platform kind of says, "Ducka ducka, hello, fellow kids." Yep. I know what I'm doing here, right? I know my way around this thing. And then I guess the other point I would make is maybe that it plays more to his strengths, because if he does it's kind of like why some of the better responses to the State of the Union have been unconventional.
Yes.
Because if you try and match the State of the Union, it doesn't look very good. But whereas
that's the worst gig in politics, by the way.
Yeah.
The response to the State of the Union address.
And this strategy has often not worked, but it has sometimes worked where it's where you sort of just say, "Hey, I'm just going to be alone by myself." Like I've always thought, if I had ever been asked to do that, I was just going to be on a living room couch, and I was not even I was going to have bullet points, and I was just going to here's some stuff that was just said, and just talk to somebody like it was just you and them. And I feel like that's sort of what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think there's Twitter now. There was a great article, I forget in which publication, was basically saying that Twitter is now the new Fox News. And, people like Daily Wire are moving all of their podcasts also to Twitter Spaces or whatever the
Tucker
equivalent
Carlson's
is.
Going there.
Tucker Carlson and all that. So in that sense, what's your number one goal with these things is to get a lot of eyeballs on it. And unquestionably, they're going to accomplish that goal. Number two is Elon Musk is a very popular guy on the right. So yes, although he probably doesn't need that much money, he will raise a lot of money in this announcement. He'll also get a lot of awareness. I think he'll take back some of the narrative over how he's dead in the water or whatever. I think part of what he'll be able to do is show himself to be a little bit nimble and responsive and less defensive, and just to have people listening to his message. And it's so hard for us to wrap our heads around it because we are not Republicans.
Right.
But what he's going to do is he's going to be troll DeSantis, and he's going to hit all the greatest hits, and he's going to talk about making America Florida again or whatever. I don't know if it ever was Florida, but make America Florida, period, I guess is his slogan. Yeah. And that's not appealing to us, but that's appealing to a lot of people in the Republican Party. And my sense, I could be wrong about this, you'll be listening to this podcast tomorrow and you'll be able to check me on this, is that the conventional media will make fun of it, but that in the end, it'll probably be better than the normal kind of like, remember when Haley announced like, no, I don't either. Right. So it's like it'll be a more memorable, effective launch than most campaigns have. That's my prediction.
And I think, you know, some people are looking at it and saying, well, you're announcing with Elon Musk, who's not even endorsing you. Right. But I think the way they're thinking of it is, well, we're announcing on Elon Musk's platform and we're using Elon Musk to get people there. It's like, did Schwarzenegger, he went on, I think on Leno, he went on the Tonight Show to announce that he was running for governor. And people were like, that's not how you do it. And it's like, well, yeah, that's not how other people do it. Now, that said, like, every time we talk about this in a way that doesn't just trash DeSantis every third sentence, we have to be like, we are against Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, but why even waste your breath? You're listening to this podcast, you know we believe that,
exactly.
Right? But
I'm just telling you.
Yeah, but the other thing that I think is, and it's important to just understand these dynamics, right? But the other thing I think is potentially genius about this move is that Musk is one of the most effective attack dogs out there on the right, if you're on the right. So here's one thing that could happen in the next 24 hours. Trump goes after Elon Musk. Right. That's a perfect scenario for
a great
DeSantis.
Point. Or anybody else does. Anybody else does. And all of a sudden, before Elon Musk realizes it, he's in the bunker with you.
Yep.
Didn't mean to be.
And that's what DeSantis
you're
wants.
Both being attacked by the same place.
That's what he wants.
That is a really good point.
I'm a firm believer that Musk took a lot of the oxygen out of Trump's shtick because he's a smarter, younger, crazier, more unpredictable, more powerful person at the moment than Trump is, who does a lot of the same stuff Trump does. He gets on Twitter, he says crazy things, you never know what you're going to get from him. And he's basically taken that place over the past 2 years. And so
particularly when you consider that even though the Musk name isn't on stuff, it's very much the way the Trump brand was everywhere. I mean, between SpaceX and Tesla and now Twitter, like everywhere people look, they feel like there's a reminder of Elon Musk.
So that's my thing. If you're DeSantis, that's what you want. You want tonight, Elon Musk at 3 a.m. logging onto Twitter and getting in a fight with Donald Trump. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen, but that is the perfect scenario for you. So with that, let's move on to this debt ceiling situation here. So as we're recording this, still no deal in sight. But Jason, you have been talking about how the GOP, and you're using this as a metaphor. You were saying how the GOP.
So are they, it turns out.
You're saying they're holding us hostage. Let's go to some audio of Matt Gaetz, America's congressman from Florida. This is what he had to say about the state of the negotiations right now.
So would you say then the conservatives like yourself are becoming more pessimistic about the state of negotiations if, there's a bipartisan deal in sight maybe? Or how would you characterize the mood among your conservative colleagues right now?
I think my conservative colleagues, for the most part, support limit, safe, grow, and they don't feel like we should negotiate with our hostage.
Man. So, I've been saying for a while that the entire dynamic of this negotiation is I'll repeat it for anybody who hasn't heard it or needs a refresher. It is a hostage situation, and Biden is the hostage negotiator. The Republicans are the hostage takers. They're holed up inside a building. They've got a bunch of hostages. And then Biden comes in and they make their demands. And their demands are like, we want a helicopter. We want all these things, right? and Biden's like, okay, I'm going to give you the helicopter. And I'm going to give you a bus to the helicopter, right? And he's like, but I'm not giving you, I'm not going to help you, get on the bus or whatever. Like, there's limits to the negotiation. And then the Republicans, the hostage takers, are like, look, we made demands. We've done everything we can do. He needs to be a grown-up and come to the table and offer some kind of compromise, right? And obviously in this metaphor, we, the American people or the American economy, those are the hostages. And we've been saying this to try to get it across to people that that's what's happening. There's not a real negotiation happening. There's a hostage crisis going on. And then Matt Gaetz or Getz or however that criminal spells pronounces his name, I can't remember. He just is like, we're not going to negotiate with the hostage, which I don't even know. I don't even think he understands the metaphor. Like, is the hostage Biden? Is the hostage us? Either way, it's not okay. I'm very confused by negotiate with. Does he mean negotiate over the hostage or negotiate directly with the hostage? Who's his hostage?
I mean, I feel like all of us really.
I think so.
So here, McCarthy was asked about why he's not floating any concessions. This is what he had to say.
You're going to need Democratic votes, probably in the House, definitely in the Senate. You have a Democrat in the White House. Why not offer a single concession beyond saying we're not going to default?
We've offered a lot of concessions. The cap on the spending is a Democrat idea. The work requirement was a Democrat idea. I can't help it if the Democrats have become so extreme and now is a party of Bernie Sanders than the party where Joe Biden was elected. Joe Biden is the president of the United States. He is the head Democrat. But if AOC and Bernie Sanders is going to run their party, that's not my fault. I'm not even sure Bernie Sanders is a registered Democrat.
Okay, a couple of things here, Jason.
Yeah.
So he's asked like, hey, like, how come you're not offering concessions? You'd be like, these are their ideas. Be like, well, no, they're not. Well, and then he's like, well, they're radical. And I'm like, well, okay, that argument didn't even last long. Like,
yeah,
those aren't democratic ideas. Like,
and if they were like, hey, would you like this? Because we don't want this, but if you want, like, we could offer you this, right?
What he's doing is saying, like, he's in a negotiation with Democrats. Democrats are offering things that they think he wants, and then he's saying they're democratic ideas. That's the best interpretation of what it is. But then when he's being called on it, he's just like, hey, they're radical. That's crazy.
So in this case, the hostage negotiator took the hostages and then wouldn't answer the phone. And then when he finally did answer the phone, they were like, would you like a helicopter or a bus? And he was like, look, I've made concessions. I considered your bus. I considered your helicopter. Like, I'm just going to shoot these hostages. It doesn't make any sense. Because they know that at the end of this hostage crisis, they can run ads that say these hostages got shot under this hostage negotiators, like, on his watch. Yeah. That's what they have on us, and we shouldn't pretend they don't. And they know it. They know that the average persuadable voter understands that there's a Democrat in the White House, and they don't often understand a lot more than that. It's not they don't understand. They don't often care about a lot more than that because they're persuadable because they got other stuff going on in their lives.
Honestly, and I do not envy Biden here because, like, he needs some GOP votes in order to avert this if you don't think he has the 14th Amendment power. But even, he's floated over the weekend that he believes he does have the 14th Amendment authority. Yellen seems a little bit cooler to that idea. Both Biden and Yellen have said that the problem is no matter what they think their authority is, they still are going to have it pass muster of this very partisan Supreme Court. So in the end, they'd have to put it in their hands. And the problem is if you go too fast to the 14th Amendment argument and then the Supreme Court shuts it down, you've now removed leverage that you have otherwise. So it's a really tricky situation, one that I do not envy Biden in. And it just seems like he's like plowing ahead and staying pretty professional. Even McCarthy called Biden professional, which is the most you're going to get out of McCarthy in terms of a compliment. But what's your sense of how this ends? Because honestly, we're running out of time. We're at May 24th. People are saying the government's going to run out of money potentially June 1st.
Or as far as the debt, you mean the debt is going to be called on? Yeah, I don't know. And not to like go backwards for a minute, but there was a discussion during the lame duck after the midterms of just going ahead and doing this and then saying that this doesn't have to be done anymore. It automatically is the debt ceiling automatically gets lifted. And boy, it really does feel like that was a real error not doing that. Now, I think if I recall correctly, my guess is maybe Manchin or somebody wasn't going to go along with it. So, just another, you can put that in the column of stuff that sucks because they wouldn't go along. But now that was all the going back I wanted to do. I don't know how this ends. I don't think we'll default. But I don't know how much they're going to have to concede, given that the Republicans are trying to increase military spending while they try to decrease all this other spending. And they're using this trick that I often saw used like in the state legislature and gets used across the board, which is every year, because of cost of living, because everything like the baseline goes up as to what something costs. So, you can, if something had a $1 spending line last year, it may have $1.10 spending line this year, but that doesn't represent an increase. That just represents this is what things cost now, as opposed to what they cost last year. And oftentimes you'll have politicians talking about that as a spending increase. And then and then they'll say, hey, we kept spending even. And they're like, no, you didn't. It increased, so what I don't know is how much of these cuts are going to be to the baseline or like real dollar to dollar cuts like this year over last year. And I would hope that that's what they're getting into at this point.
Yeah, we've long discussed in this podcast how there's seasonal deficit hawks, that if you look at the data, actually Republican presidents have a worse record of growing the debt than Democrats do. And here's another prediction. God forbid our next president Republican, and they do pass these spending caps. Those spending caps won't last 100 days under the next Republican president. That's true. So that's just what we're looking for.
They'll fall in love with a tax cut. Here's the argument I could make strategically for why this makes sense for the Republicans right now, even if they end up eventually not defaulting, right? Which is that now we're talking about this. I mean, we're spending a long period of time talking about spending, and the Republicans are going to go out there and say that there's too much spending, which a lot of people agree with just generally. So they're getting to look like they're on the right side of this. Like a lot of people, like a lot of people will sympathize with that. Not all people, but there are a fair amount of persuadable people who will sympathize with the general idea that spending needs to be cut without getting into the specifics of what kind of spending. That's good for them. And it also keeps Biden on defense. So it means we're not talking about the need for an assault weapons ban right now. We're not talking about, all sorts of things that are very popular in Biden's agenda that came out of the State of the Union, that he could be hammering the Republicans in the House with all the time. And that therefore the Republican presidential candidates would have to respond to. That none of that's happening because they're keeping this going exactly the way it is. And so that's to their advantage, no matter what happens at the end of this.
Right. Yeah. I've long felt like if the Republicans were smart, they would move tax day to right before the election, because then they'd be able to talk about what they love talking about, which is out of control spending.
That's a great point.
All right. Well, we're going to take a break and hear from our sponsors, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about some really troubling trends coming out of this Bud Light boycott that we talked about, and how now the Republicans are moving on to other corporations after they feel like they've tasted blood. And then we're going to talk about this curious incident in which Marjorie Taylor Greene paid $100,000 for used chapstick. All of that and more when we return.
Majority 54 is sponsored by Lomi. I have a family that apparently creates a lot of waste. And when I say it that way, it sounds funny. We create a lot of trash, a lot of stuff that should go in the trash. And that means that when you have a lot of trash left over and then the week comes to an end, in our area, trash gets picked up on Wednesday, most of the time I feel pretty guilty about it because I'm like the guy out there with multiple bags and I got to like ask a neighbor, can I put it in your spot? Or I've got to get one of these tags from the city and I put that on my trash that says I paid for this extra bag. But Lomi transforms all that extra garbage into gold at the push of a button. Lomi is a countertop electric composter that turns food scraps to dirt in under 4 hours. And now I am that guy that I remember from my neighborhood when I was younger, the kind of strange guy who loves composting. But now I don't think it's strange. Now I just think it's awesome. Yeah, it's like made cooking at home even more fun because when there's food waste, oh, awesome, that goes into the compost even better. So there's no food rotting in the garage and smelling up the kitchen. Thanks to Lomi, I only have to take out the trash this once a week, and it's hassle free. And I don't have the embarrassment of like everybody's using my extra bags. I get to help the environment. environment and make my life easier. All of my food scraps, my plant clipping, even those leftovers that I forgot in the back of the fridge, they go back into what would be my garden if I have a garden, but instead, they go into making the grass be a little bit greener. And it helps me grow, should I start a garden, more nutritious food right in the backyard. So whether you want to start making a positive environmental impact or just grow a beautiful garden, Lomi is perfect for you. Head to lomi.com/majority54 and use the promo code majority54 to get $50 off your Lomi. That's $50 off when you head to lomi.com/majority54 and use promo code majority54 at checkout. Thank you, Lomi, for sponsoring this episode. If you've been listening to this show for a while or even for a short period of time, you know that we love our athletic greens. And we're always talking about the travel packs. I thought for today's ad, I would just drop some knowledge on you about what I've learned, my wisdom about how to use the travel packs. I just got done with a trip to New York and to DC, and I figured out a few years ago that the best way to do it is you get like a bottled water. Like AG1 will send you like your own water bottle, and that's great for at home. Personally, because I don't want to clean it, I don't take that with me on the road. So what I do is I just get a bottled water at the beginning of the trip. I refill it a few times, and right before I actually put my AG1 in there, I just take a sip. So you get like an extra inch of space in the water bottle, and then you just open up the travel pack and you just pour the greens right in, put the cap on, shake it up. It works perfectly. It makes it where you can take your AG1 every day of your trip, every day that you're traveling. I currently take it in the morning. I think Ravi takes his in the afternoon. It makes me feel like I'm giving my body the nutrition that it craves, like I'm covering my nutritional bases. If you're looking for a simpler and cost-effective supplement routine, Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 of those travel packs for free. And that's with your first purchase. So go to athleticgreens.com/majority. That's athleticgreens.com/majority. Check it out.
Well, Jason, in more depressing news, we had covered multiple times this Bud Light boycott when it was in its infancy, and we were debating at the time, was this going to be effective or not? At first, we were like, "Hey, this is laughable; it's not effective." But then we started to raise questions pretty early on to be like, "Well, actually, like if these folks get a little momentum, this could be really dangerous." And it turns out they've accomplished what they wanted. We talked about how Matt Walsh called for this boycott and says they wanted a victory. And now as we look back, by the second week of May, Bud Light sales volume is down more than 28% compared to the same period last year, as its competitors saw increases during the equivalent period of time. And Bud Light capitulated. For a couple of weeks they were silent, and then they started running patriotic ads to try to capitulate certain people. And then they wound up putting on leave the marketing executive who is responsible for this, and that marketing executive's boss. And so they've now managed to piss off both the right and the left here, which is depressing alone. But now the right, the Daily Wires of the world, Matt Walsh, et cetera, are moving on and explicitly stating that they're going after other companies. And it seems like Target is in their sights right now.
Yeah, I was actually in a Target the other day, and I walked in and I saw the display at the front that it was not like in your face, but there was like an LGBTQ sort of pride thing, and it was just like a few shirts. And I remember thinking to myself, "Oh, I wonder how long this will last." Like before any of this stuff came out, I was thinking about the Bud Light stuff, and I was like, "Wow, they're really leaning into this." And now it sounds like they're leaning back out to me.
Yeah. I mean, so the basics here is that for over a decade, they've sold a selection of, LGBTQ friendly apparel, especially around Pride Month, including like rainbow adorned clothing, et cetera. And they've sometimes received criticism of this, but they've largely stayed strong. But this year, it seems like under pressure and in some cases vandalism, they've backed out. They've removed certain items and also have moved the displays from the front of the store in certain cases. And it really does seem like they're caving to the terrorists. Let's go to a clip here. This is a clip of somebody, and for audio, I'll try to narrate this for you. This is a clip of somebody going through a Target location and knocking down the Pride display.
That there is no insert. There's nothing on it. So...
It's disgusting. That's the devil worshiper. devil worship. That's devil worship.
So, for those of you who are listening at home, it's a guy just walking around. He picks up the rainbow display, throws it on the ground, kicks it, while another woman who's watching along says, "What's wrong with you?" Which would be my question too. And basically there's this effort out there, starting with certain right-wing voices like Matt Walsh, who've been explicit about their goals here. And then basically, domestic terrorists on the ground trying to intimidate Target and its employees, and Target is to a certain extent back down.
Yeah. And I think it's important here to note that while you don't want to see Target back down, it is a real consideration. Like they talked about in terms of the safety of their employees. Like it is like, that's not an unreal thing because you don't want to see them back down, but also like if you're an executive at Target, what you also don't want is to find out that there was a shooting inside Target, or that somebody was beaten, that one of your employees was. And so it is not an easy decision here. This is not like with Bud Light, where it's like, we might sell less beer. Like Bud Light doesn't have Bud Light stores that people can, just walk into necessarily and create what are basically terroristic acts.
Yeah. And there was this controversy over a swimsuit, which was, and this is from the reporting of the Wall Street Journal, what the Wall Street Journal described as transgender friendly. And of course, the right claimed it was for children. Target confirmed that it was for adults only. And putting aside whether like trans children are entitled to bathing suits, this is like it's just sowing misinformation and not being responsible in any way for what they're saying. And this gets to a familiar point. I had a debate and discussion with a more conservative friend yesterday about this. And, she was saying, hey, like, this is just people being like frustrated over what they view as corporations, wading into politics and yada, yada. I was like, look, we can have a debate about whether, the NFL is genuine when they, throw up a BLM hashtag or something. Like that's one thing. This is not that. Like the Bud Light thing was about just a transgender person being allowed to, to be entitled to the same kind of viral marketing treatment that everybody else who has big followings get. We've previously talked about how, Ben Shapiro, basically was ready to call for a boycott of Disney if they even had a gay character in Frozen. Right. And now in this case, it's like acknowledging LGBTQ pride and the existence of trans people in your apparel is wrong. So if you have conservative family members who are like, hey, I'm just sick of corporations telling me what to do, et cetera, it's like, you don't have to buy any of that stuff. You don't have to like pay attention to a trans influencer if you don't want to. But what Matt Walsh, the Daily Wire, and all these other people are trying to do is erase identities. It has nothing to do with their messages that they disagree with. It has to do with the identities of the very people they're going after. And this should be wrong for people who aren't even with you on all of the trans rights arguments that you make.
I also think what's interesting about this is that this, unlike what we're seeing out of state legislatures, for instance, this is going way beyond just targeting, and I'm not excusing this, but it is a more narrow group when in the state legislatures, when they're going after, in most cases, like trans athletes. Now it has branched out, like in Kansas and Missouri here, to gender affirming care. But even that, again, not excusable, but it is more narrow than just LGBT anything, right? And so what I think is notable about that is that the right has figured out, hey, from a legislative standpoint, we can do these things that are bigoted and hateful, and we can score political points as a result. But if we branch out too far in the legislative arena, well, then there's going to be a backlash to that there are diminishing returns politically. However, the Matt Walshes of the world, they're not looking for political gain out of this. They and the Daily Wire and all of these folks, they're looking for monetary gain. They're looking for, how do we get clicks? How do we rev people up? And how do we stay in this subset of people who would love to see, same-sex marriage be banned again, and would love to see all these things that don't appeal politically, but we can make money off of these people and their hatred. That is what is, I think, so cynical about this, but yet at the same time is kind of makes me feel a little bit more idealistic, that they realize that they've lost the political legislative battle and now they're just trying to maximize the amount of money. Now, it doesn't victimize people well, it does less, in that you're not going to get laws against it, but it doesn't put people any less in danger of these people who will do homegrown terrorism and will go and find a target employee or a trans person and will physically hurt them and become violent. That is just as serious. But it is just interesting to me that this has become an industry where you can attack the LGBT community writ large. You can't do it politically, but you can do it in the entertainment space for these folks and make them feel like they belong, and you can make good money off of it.
Yeah, and I think this is really important when you're talking to people who, and sorry, there's like an ambulance or something going down the street over here. You might be able to pick that up on my mic. But when you're talking to people in your life, and I have this experience, I know a lot of our listeners will talk about this. Some people on the right are like connoisseurs of anecdotes that take so much time to figure out about this kid who did this surgery in this state and whether it's right or wrong, et cetera. And I often have, and I do this for a living, I often have a hard time keeping up with what are all these stories people are telling. And I think what this saga gives you is the opportunity to step outside of like this sort of like picking and choosing, cherry picking anecdotes, which sometimes aren't reliably communicated to you, and just say, look, I don't know about what happened in that, hospital in Tennessee that you're talking about. I'll look it up. But what I do know is that they're saying out loud what their motivations are, which goes well beyond any debate we could have about what age a kid should be when they receive a surgery, or at what age a kid should transition, and yada, yada, yada. And it goes to the heart of whether people should exist and be free to be who they are. And I think you start to like expand the circle of people you could persuade on these issues once you remind them what the project is. Because what Ben Shapiro is saying around Frozen, which is that if they have a gay character, that we should boycott Disney, or in his case, he says that it will be the end of Disney, right? Then most sensible people, including certain center-right people, look at that and they say, well, that's a little crazy position, right? Because there are gay people in society. Shouldn't they be represented on TV? And it's like a small thing to ask that, some characters show up on TV that represent society writ large, right? Like make them explain their extreme position.
And, we've said this a lot on the show, and personalize it, because, not everybody listening to this has, with the conservative relative they're going to argue with, has a mutual friend or relative who is trans, but you all have one who is gay. Yep. And like, you cannot be afraid to humanize that conversation. And if you don't have that, don't be afraid to humanize the conversation by saying, like, what if I was trans? What if I right now told you I was? Or what if right now I told you that I was gay? May have told this story before, but back during Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I knew a guy. He was an active duty lieutenant colonel in the Army, and he had a rule, because it's, I'm sure, not really the case anymore because of the way the culture of the military has changed, although I'm sure it's sometimes the case, but much less the case, that homophobic language just for a long time was just sort of part of the lexicon in the military. And his way of dealing with that. Now, this guy was straight. He was married to a woman, and he had a family with her. But whenever he would start a new assignment, he often was the boss. And if anybody would say anything even like remotely homophobic around him, he would say, hey, and this was during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He'd say, the rule is don't ask, don't tell. You cannot ask me whether or not I'm gay, and I can't tell you whether I'm gay. But for the course of the 2 years to 4 years that we'll be on this assignment working together, I would prefer you just assume that I'm gay, so that none of those things are said, in this unit. And I've never forgotten that. I thought that was such a unique approach. And I think you can use that with people in your life. You can say, hey, you know what? Just assume that like I might be trans. And then maybe just, approach our relationship that way. And it can change the way people think about things. You don't have to actually have a trans or a gay person in your mutual relationship with somebody to personalize that.
Yeah, well said. Well, let's talk about something truly trivial for a second here, which is I have this sort of section of our outlines I always call quick hits, and this one we don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but I want you to explain to me what the hell is going on here, Jason.
I don't know.
So apparently there's some kind of fundraiser for the House Republican campaign arm, and Marjorie Taylor Greene placed the winning bid, which is $100,000 for used chapstick that was used by Speaker McCarthy. I don't get it. I have so many questions. First of all, I didn't realize that Marjorie Taylor Greene was the type of person who's wealthy enough to throw around $100,000.
Is she? I want to bring this up again and look, because I have to assume this is coming from like her campaign committee.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Let's see. Let's look. You keep explaining this while I look.
What else is there to explain? I don't know. Honestly, I can't. It's just a crazy thing. Like,
it has to be coming from her. I mean, first of all, if she actually gave $100,000 of her own money, then that's kind of scandalous on its own. But because if she's got that kind of coin sitting around, because I don't think to my knowledge, she hasn't like.
She was she used to own CrossFit gyms. I don't know if she still does, but she was.
So then that's possible, I guess. But either way, usually the way this works is it's just members writing checks to the overall committee to keep the majority. Like when I was in the state house, I remember I served on the House Democratic Campaign Committee, which was just our attempt to try and take the majority. And we were all expected to, give from our committees to the Central Committee a certain amount. Not everybody did, but it was something you were kind of expected to do, so that even if you were in a safe seat, you were expected to still go out there and raise money so that you could help, the overall campaign arm. The weird part is that Marjorie Taylor Greene has gone from like, I am exclusively anti-establishment to I buy the chapstick of Kevin McCarthy for $100,000. Now, I guess to benefit the cause of advancing the Galactic Empire, which is what she believes in, but still, it's odd, man. But you know what? Stuff like this happens inside. Okay, so wait, Brett is telling us here she's very wealthy and inherited money from her father and took over his construction company. Well, that's pretty. That's true to character. That stays true to form. So I believe that. But the point is, like, in this world of like the little club inside of a House caucus, something like buying the chapstick can make perfect sense, because once you get into an insular little world, whether it be Republican or Democratic or otherwise, or just like a fraternity or a sorority or a Dungeons and Dragons club, is that a thing? I don't know. It all seems weird to the outside. So this is a strange situation where I'm going to say this is one of the least strange things that Marjorie Taylor Greene has done, because members of Congress and politicians, it's amazing what will become normal for them.
All right.
Because, when he goes to the House GOP.
Should we do grab an or one for us first?
Let's do grab an or real quick. I'll make it quick, which is we didn't have anything specific to throw out this week. So I just am going to remind people about Veterans Community Project, which is my day job, which is, because we say a lot of partisan stuff on here, I will just say it is in no way affiliated with this podcast. It's just something I care about. And if you don't know about Veterans Community Project, you can go to vcp.org, like VictorCharliePapa.org, vcp.org, or veteranscommunityproject.org. And what we do is we build outreach centers for any veteran of any type to prevent veteran suicide and connect them with services. And we also, what we're better known for, we build villages of tiny houses with wraparound services to transition homeless veterans out of homelessness and back into being fully functioning, contributing members of society, which we do at unprecedented 85% success rate. I am the president of national expansion at Veterans Community Project, have been for 4 years, and we are now cutting ribbons in Denver and Sioux Falls and soon in St. Louis. And it's very exciting. We continue to build and add more locations. So vcp.org, we are almost entirely privately funded. Please feel free to throw us some of your coins. We could maybe bring out some chapstick. I don't know.
Yeah, well, actually, I told you I didn't have a grab and or this week, but I actually do have one. First of all, I fully endorse giving and supporting the Veterans Community Project, such important work. One thing, and I have to be a little circumspect about how I talk about this, but I'm working on a narrative podcast series with Ben Rhodes about India, which is ostensibly the world's largest democracy. And we have a story that's really important to tell that we're working on, and we just wrapped up the pre-production phase on this, and we're looking to raise money in order to make this documentary podcast series a reality. And we need to raise some more money in order to greenlight it and travel to India and tell this story. And basically the stakes are as high as it can get. Like, this is about the future of the world's largest democracy as it backslides pretty tremendously. And we need to raise money in order to do it right. And so we need some partners for this. And so we're looking to travel the country and potentially do events no matter where you are. We would consider coming out there, doing a little like reception or something, talk about the event. Or we could just talk about it. So like, if you just, want to email me and be, hey, I want to hear more about this, I might be able to support it, or know people who might support the fight for global democracy. If they're members of the India diaspora community, they just care about democracy and the freedom of the press and elections, and that's the kind of stuff. So if you're interested in any of that and you're interested in hearing more, email me at ravi@thebranchmedia.org. That's ravi@thebranchmedia.org. And I could share probably more information about it to you, and we could talk about how we could work together on that.
And I'll just say, I've had the opportunity to see a lot of the materials about this and the slide deck and everything, and it is 100% a story that needs to be told, and Ravi's going to tell it really well. So I would encourage people to reach out and to find a way to support it. So, all right. That said, one for us.
Yeah.
You were really sick until like this morning.
I was really sick, man. I don't like, it is the worst possible time. It's beautiful here in New York. And, but I was able to just sleep it off, catch up on Ted Lasso, and, just eat junk food. So
yeah. So you're feeling better now. You're
feeling better.
What does it mean when you eat junk food? That was probably
no. I know how to eat. Like, I know how to eat junk food. So yeah. I ate. I'll just tell you, one of my 2 meals yesterday was an entire pizza. So,
okay, all right.
So I know how to do
I've eaten an entire pizza with you. I know you can do that. All right. Well, for me, what a week, man. I mean, we were out there in New York last week, got to see you. First class experience that True got to have in New York. He recognizes that's not a normal New York experience. We stayed with our friend Claire McCaskill in her very nice condo there in New York, which she has because of the MSNBC work. And then we went to New York, the new Broadway show that our great uncle wrote with Lin-Manuel Miranda. And like before, we went to dinner with my uncles 2 nights in a row, which was great. And then the second night, Claire came, and that was really fun. And then we went to the show, and the show was amazing. So if you're watching this or listening to this, go see New York on Broadway. Like it is so good. And the whole show is really unbelievable. But then like the final number, which is just what you'd expect, but the way it's done, I mean, it was very emotional for us. I think it was for the whole crowd, but especially for me and my wife, because like my uncle has done a lot of Broadway shows, and this is the one that like you can see his whole heart in it, because he's from Kansas City, but he's lived in New York since he got home from World War II. He's 96 years old, and so much of what he has said to us over the years about why he loves New York, he wrote the song New York, like why he's so passionate about it is we got to hear it in the dialogue between the characters. The things he has said to us, like in my grandparents' house in Kansas City over the years, was there, and it was very cool. And then I'm just giving a full report on my trip. And then we went down to DC, and Georgetown University gave me an honorary doctorate, and I delivered the commencement address, which was
congrats on that, man.
An interesting life experience. Yeah, thank you. Oh, look at that. Brett put up a little B-roll of it. That's very
so
cool.
Prepared.
That's amazing, isn't it? So I've arrived at a point in my life where and you're here too, I think. I know you are, where we're no longer really interested in the bullet points of resume building. Like I'd really like to have done this, or say I did the, like, I don't think either of us are interested in that sort of thing anymore. And really getting an honorary doctorate and giving the commencement address is kind of one of those things, right? It's the kind of thing where, I mean, I'll be honest, like when I got home after a couple of days, I updated the bio on my website to include it. So I know it is one of those things. And I really thought I was past wanting into those, but this was kind of the last one where when they brought it up to me, I was like, you know what? Yes, I think I do covet that accolade, because
it's nice.
Yeah. And I didn't get into Georgetown for undergrad. It's where I wanted to go, and I didn't get in. And then, I made it my mission to get good grades in college so I could go there for law school, and I did. But I think I always still sort of had a little bit of an imposter complex about it. And then when you stand in front of 2,000 people and your dad is there and they read this very nice citation, and it's a graduation at Georgetown and they're holding you up as an alum, like it did make me feel good. And I went to the bookstore and I bought a sweatshirt, and and that's what I'm taking home from it. But on the real, the biggest thing happening this week is that, as you know, I'm giving like a full report, Robbie.
I love this. I want to see this speech, by the way. Is it online yet?
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
I'm gonna pull it up.
Brett, you must have found it.
Yeah,
because Brett found it. So we could put it in the show notes, I guess, and you got to put the timestamp as to where to go in it. But anyway, as you know, it's 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, I started accidentally Afghan Rescue Project to try and get some people I served with in Afghanistan out of the country. We were successful in doing that. We got a bunch of them to Albania in this crazy story that you know well. And then we've gotten over 2,000 people out now, but that original group of 371 has been languishing in Albania for a long time, where we've been trying to get the U.S. government to let them in and let them resettle. And now they are finally really starting to. And the original family, my buddy Rahim and his family, now finally have their visas. And in about 1 week, they are going to arrive here in the United States, and they're coming, to Missouri. And that's where they're going to live the rest of their lives with their kids and everybody. And it's unreal, like that it's finally happening. And my whole family's going to go to welcome them here. And I'm honorary doctorate school and all that, but this is one of the coolest things I've ever been able to do. So I'm going to get to watch these. He's got 4 kids, and then there's a couple of 3 nephews, and they're all under 10. And I'm going to get to watch these kids grow up, and hopefully I'm droning on a little bit. Like, what I hope is that in 10 years, they'll be involved in regular, like looking at college and all that kind of stuff. And they will, at that point, not have any accent at all. It'll be unaccented English for the most part. Not that matters, but like my point being, they will have not lost touch with their roots, but have the American luxury of taking for granted the other direction their life should. Like, that's what I hope for them. I just want to watch them become regular American kids, and have their parents be like, oh, they don't even know how hard it was. Like, I cannot wait to see that. It's going to make me so happy. So anyway, that's
incredible, man. What a series of updates, man.
Yeah, been wild.
Well, I think that's all we got today.
Oh yeah, I guess I should close it out. I was so busy talking. And
that's great.
All right, Ravi gave like a 30-second update, and then I gave a book report. All right, remember to subscribe to Majority 54 wherever you listen to audio podcasts. Just search Majority 54. Please leave a 5-star review. Thank you to the Meidas Mighty. Remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.